Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to change your opinion and the way you think about education. This is something that should have been done a long time ago, and the reason for it is quite simple. The old way of thinking about it hasn't gotten the job done. We have to think about education in new and different ways so that we can come up with new and different ways to improve it. Education is a business. It's more than a business. It's a big business. It is so big that it affects the economy. That means that everybody is affected by the educational system. I don't care if you have kids. I don't care if you don't have kids. I don't care if you don't even like kids. And if you don't like kids, I frankly don't know what you're doing here. It makes no difference. If you live in a state or work in a state, you're affected by that state's public education system. Education's impact on the economy is pretty diverse. For example, for a state, if the state is interested in attracting business, retaining business, quality workforce, taxes come into play, property values, crime rates, longevity, population shifts. With population shifts, if people have a couple choices to make about where to purchase a house, oftentimes the final selection is decided by the answer to this one simple question: how good are the neighborhood schools? We also have a situation where there are people who work in one state and live across the state line. Now, these factors did not go unnoticed here in the state of Delaware. As a matter of fact, some people got together and came up with what was called a bold plan. Now, these someones happened to be the governor of Delaware, it was the state superintendent of the public schools, and it was a consortium of businesses headed up by Delaware's DuPont company. They got together to formulate a bold plan. What did they want to do with this bold plan? They wanted to change the educational system. They were interested in a systemic change to education in the state of Delaware. Sounds almost altruistically motivated, doesn't it? It's not. The reason why they wanted to do it, they wanted to improve the state's economy. That was the connection back then. It's the same one today. Now the big question comes up with, how were they going to do it? What was the mechanism that was going to improve or do this systemic change that you've heard people talking about? Well, now for the Delawareans, I don't want you to get ahead of me on this, because what we have today is not what was intended back in 1995. But the change agent to improve the public schools was charter schools. There were going to be a few charter schools. They were going to try things like local control. Now, the good things that they found were supposed to be implemented in the traditional schools. That's how change was to take place, through the traditional schools and the school system. Now, this idea of local control, I want to give you a better idea of what this means, because we're talking about not tweaking, we're talking about substantive changes here today. And it was the state superintendent, who, by the way, was the co-author of the charter law. He wrote an overview to the charter law. I'm going to give you some of the things he put into that overview. He said that reliance on bureaucratic decisions would be a thing of the past. Try new approaches to learning without bureaucratic restrictions. He had in there, empower local communities to try new, unique solutions to problems facing their own schools. Notice the trend here is towards customized schools as opposed to standardized schools. So I must confess, I went to the superintendent, the state superintendent, and I said, you know, your overview is not necessarily that long, but yeah, I wanted the Reader's Digest version of what he was saying. So here's what he said to me. He said it to me directly. He said, Ron, look, except for federal laws and laws involving health and safety, you're free to do whatever you want. But you have to be willing to accept the responsibility for the outcome. It was very simply autonomy and accountability. Now, this consortium that I talked about of businesses, they wanted to do a pilot program just to see, you know, how is this thing going to go? How's it going to work? So the first thing they did is they went and they hired an experienced administrator. The administrator already had 26 years of administrative experience, 18 of them as the principal of the largest non-public school in the state. He was intelligent, he was personable, don't be rude, and he was extremely good looking. Apparently the mic must not be working. And let me tell you, if you couldn't figure out who it is by now, I don't know what you're doing here today. So I had to go to the executive offices of the DuPont company to meet with the chairman because he was doing the hiring. So I go into the office, and here's what he says to me right off the bat. He said, hey, Ron, the businesses don't know how to run a school. That's why we're hiring you. Now, I got to tell you, I felt awfully good at that point. Can you imagine it? The chairman of the board is saying to me, I can do something that these large corporations cannot do. So I felt good. He follows that up with two other directives. The next one was, Ron, just get the job done. Now again, I feel good. You talk about a level of confidence. I mean, it's like a Nike thing, just do it. And then he follows with the next one. He said, Ron, the companies have their reputations on the line. Failure is not an option. Notice autonomy, accountability. Now, for people in education, that seems like a strange way of operating, but in the business world, it's not really, because oftentimes companies will somehow get the expertise or the knowledge to get something done. They'll put people in charge, give them the power to get the job done, tell them what they want, and then they get out of the way. Autonomy, accountability. Teachers, principals working together in a collaborative, distributive leadership format so that decisions, operational decisions, will be made at the building level where the rubber meets the road. So, you know, this all looked pretty good. But the question now comes, did it work? Well, as it turns out, Delaware's Department of Education hired Dr. Gary Mirren of Western Michigan University's Evaluation Center. They hired him to do a 3-year study of charter schools here in the state of Delaware. I was able to meet with Dr. Mirren in my office. I wanted to go over the evaluation as it pertained to the pilot program and how did the BOLD plan, which was tried out in the pilot program, how did it work? He said to me, Ron, we were able to do a head-to-head comparison between the pilot program and the traditional schools. And we were able to do it with the same type of student in both. He said the pilot program outperformed the traditional schools consistently. So we have a pilot program that showed that this bold idea worked well. And the idea was not implemented throughout the state. What happened? Delaware's governor became Delaware's senator. The superintendent, who was the co-author of the charter law, passed away. The heads of those consortium businesses that I talked about earlier, they were gone. There was a turnover. They were all gone. So this base of support for the bold idea, it dissipated. Now, what else happened? When that happened, the educational public school system, the very entity that was supposed to be changed, took over the change agent. So now, what's your takeaway from all of this? Well, one, you got to change your opinion on education. Education is a business that affects the economy. You got to get that in your mind. What is your action plan? What do you do from here? Action plan. What you have to do is get behind any plan or activity that's going to support a policy of autonomy and accountability. By implementing the BOLD plan with its proven success track record of local control, teachers, principals working together collaboratively. Once you've done all that, your homework assignment is to answer this one question. Do we have too many school districts? Ladies and gentlemen, class dismissed.